All right, good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome into the Nifty Q show. We're interviewing founders, leaders, and builders in the non-fungible token industry. Today I am sitting with Susan Cummings, CEO of Petaverse Network and Tiny Rebel Games. We'll be discussing the future of augmented reality, building a platform for digital metaverse companions, interoperability as a North Star, and much more. Susan, this is the Nifty Q show, but it's also going to be a TED Talk, apparently. That's what we were talking about prior to starting up. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm great. It sounds like you're going to talk about all my favorite things.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. You are in NFT Amsterdam. How is that going right now? I think you just got there today.
I did. I just arrived. It's absolutely beautiful here. Like it's sunny and warm, and I hope it lasts into tomorrow and the next day when I actually get to go and see people. So, but yeah, I mean, with the pandemic and everything, this is one of the first NFT events as a game industry person I've got to go to. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm a gamer myself, so I know you mentioned a couple titles that I was really like just getting the nostalgic feel for, right? Grand Theft Auto. You guys have worked on a lot of the biggest games just in the industry as a total. But before we get started and I get a little bit of your background, I need to ask the question because Petaverse is there's a lot of cats being thrown around. Obviously, it's an augmented reality platform. You've got a lot of digital cats that are going to be our companions in the metaverse. Are you a dog or a cat person?
I'm actually a dog person.
Thank you.
But there's a good reason for it. But I'm actually a dog person when it comes down to it.
So why is Petaverse going with cats first?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, where it comes to AR, cats actually work really beautifully because they're vertical. Dogs don't jump up on onto surfaces in the same way that the cats do. And so where it comes to LiDAR and bringing space to life, cats are awesome. Secondly, dogs have been bred to hell in a million different directions. There's little Chihuahuas and Great Danes and all sorts of big, furry, and thin things. And to try to get all of the dogs is a massive undertaking. That's why like Nintendogs took so long and still had a very small subset of dogs. With cats, one model and clever blend shapes, and we can do damn near any cat that you can imagine really efficiently. So those are kind of the three things. And I really have fallen in love with cats on the back of this project. I really want a cat now. I've got two dogs, and I'm trying to figure out how I fit a cat into that ecosystem.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough. The cats usually come in and take over too. The cats are
Yeah.
just like full alpha mode over the dogs. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be in the platform, but I can't promise that I'm going to get a cat here anytime soon. My dog would not like that. But let's talk a little bit about your background. You have again that fantastic game development background. Tiny Rebel Games is going to be doing a lot of things other than the Petaverse Network, but we're focused primarily on Petaverse today. Now, what was that background? You have 25 years, I think I read of gaming experience and game development experience. Let's touch on that background of yours.
Yeah, my partner and I both, we met and fell in love in San Francisco 24 years ago. And we've been in video games and working together ever since, like over 2 decades now, which is just wild. We spent the sort of most pivotal bit of that in New York at Take-Two in its early days. It was right after GTA 3 shipped that we joined. And so my partner was a producer, worked his way up to producing on the Grand Theft Auto series, started in QA and worked his way up to be Sam Houser's right hand on, the most important Rockstar projects at the time. And also redesigned Bully. And I ended up being given a lot of money to work with the CEO of Take-Two to start new stuff. So we started 2K Games and 2K Sports together with a couple other execs. And it was pretty wild. We signed Bioshock when nobody else was willing to pay for it. I love Ken Levine. No one shared the vision. We did. Borderlands was signed on a verbal pitch at E3 by Gearbox. We bought Civ from Atari and bought Firaxis. We bought Sega Sports and turned it into 2K Sports. Just all these wild things that we did at the time that are now, some of the main things Take-Two's known for.
Yeah, well, I'm in a whirlwind right now. You mentioned a lot of IP there, a lot of brands. So what were you and Lee specifically doing?
So Lee was in production. He started in QA, and then he moved up to associate producer and design. And on my side, I started on Rockstar, and then on the 2K side, I was originally the head of publishing. So I was responsible for both production and business development. And once it got really big, we decided that Greg Goby, who's no longer there, would come in and head up production, and I would continue to build the product portfolio. So I've always had this sort of hand in both the sort of business side of things and the product side of things, and managing producers and things like that. Really, I've always just had a good gut instinct about original IP and, taking risks.
Yeah, speaking of those risks, like there's timelines that maybe are similar to the gaming experiences that you've had within that industry and the industry that we're in now. Obviously with NFTs, are there parallels that you can kind of say, hey, throughout my time in the gaming industry, there were these ebbs and flows of new things that were maybe really applauded or really shunned. NFTs are kind of in the middle. But are there any similarities between like those timelines in your time in gaming and what you're seeing in NFTs?
Oh, 100%. The biggest one's free to play. I have vivid memories of the first game developer conference of that sort of era when King showed up and they were all dressed as Candy in the Candy Crush days, walking around San Francisco. And we were all like, what the hell? Get away. Like, this is our industry. And then eventually it became mass market and everyone plays free to play games. But I think there's a big learning from that some people are kind of missing right now. And which is that free to play didn't start with Call of Duty. It took a long time to get there. It started with Candy Crush, Bejeweled, Farmville, Facebook social games, and all that sort of stuff. And then it gradually transitioned to mid-core. And then eventually you have Call of Duty Mobile. No one thinks anything of that. And my concern in blockchain is that it's going to be the same sort of path. And I think that there is this sort of feeling that we should rush into hardcore games and get the gamers convinced. And I think they will be convinced eventually. I really do legitimately think that with the right messaging and the right content, but it's going to take time to get there. And those games take a long time to make. And so it's my firm belief that hyper casual is where it's going to start.
There's a lot to unpack there. I guess the mobile industry and the rise of that in what early 2010s, maybe I'm off there, but what was that like being kind of in the middle of that? Because I'm mainly a desktop gamer. And people thinking with NFT games now, there's a lot of desktop games being pushed, but it's probably, like you said, they're going to be more mobile casual players that are the adopters of NFTs.
I think mobile is going to be really key. We're supporting mobile and web and a variety of different platforms. The challenge with mobile, obviously, is what Apple decides to do, and nobody's ever quite certain what their opinions are on these things until they tell us. We love Apple. We've got a close relationship with them, and so it feels like there's going to be opportunities to do this stuff. But we'll have to figure out navigating Apple rules on the App Store and stuff, and just nobody knows. And so that's probably the biggest wild card for everyone right now. Is how quickly do they jump on board? But on the other hand, MoonPay just announced that you can, Apple Pay, and that's awesome and really exciting, because I think what it's going to take on mobile is custodial wallets and credit card purchases, and not even realizing that you're buying an NFT. And there are people who buy NFTs and don't even know they bought an NFT, and that's when we're going to start to get to some ubiquity. There's tens of thousands of people who are like hardcore NFT purchasers right now. How do we get to the 24 million people who bought Nintendogs? Like, that's going to take custodial wallets and the sort of tropes of mobile and free to play, I think, to try to get to that kind of ubiquity.
I don't mean to skip a couple steps here, but you guys are obviously launching a mobile first platform. Are you seeing some of this within the community that you have today? Are they coming in and maybe are new to blockchain in general, or do you see more like of just NFT native folks kind of coming into your community at this time?
I think it's a combination from what I'm seeing. There's definitely a lot of interest from the sort of traditional crypto world because it's an NFT, right? I think that there has been a lot of exuberance about the fact that we come from the game industry, because there have been scams and people are concerned and wanting to see information about founders, which is legitimately something you should be, looking for, right? So I think people are excited about our backgrounds and the fact that we've got a really, I think, impressive list of Web3 investors involved in the project that also give us credibility. So no, I think it's going to take time to get to that mass market. I think it's a journey that we're on. I think that our core audience right now is the same core audience everyone else is going after in crypto. But I think as these apps come out and it becomes less about the selling, less about the commodity and more about permanent ownership of your stuff, that I think we start to get to the mass market like that. That not to go off down like a completely different rabbit hole.
Well, we said we were going to be on it.
where is the value in an NFT, right? Like that's a whole other topic. Is the value being able to resell it, or is the value in the like is that a cop out? Is the value really that you bought something and you love it so much and there's so many things you can do with it and it's going to pain you to sell it? Like it's going to physically hurt to be like, I'm going to part with this thing because the offer is so good. Wouldn't it be awesome to get to that point that people really want to keep these things? Like I'm really inspired by Doodles. Love that project. I love the fact specifically that they want you to hold on to your doodle to be able to vote. Like I think it's really bold.
So the opposite of that is what you're saying is happening right now. People just kind of flipping assets and in the financialization of NFTs right now. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be there, right? I mean, that's a fundamental part of owning something is being able to sell it, right? So you should always be able to do that. I think though, if we can do our job properly, if we really hit the ambition of where we're going with this, I don't think people are going to want to sell it. They'll want to breed it, but I hope they're not going to want to sell it. Do you want to sell your virtual friend? It's like selling your invisible friend from childhood. Do you really want to sell that? Yeah. I don't know. Maybe some people will, but I hope not. I hope we can make it cool enough to keep it. Because otherwise you lose your community, right? Isn't there something contrary about saying we want you to buy this so that you'll resell it and go away?
Yeah,
and we struggle with that, just as game people.
There's a lot of analog experiences of like owning a car, but it means something to your family, so you can't sell it, right? Like with my Bored Ape, it's not even really that it is like financially profitable. It's my personality. It is who I am. So I feel like I need to have it, but. I don't want to make it down too many rabbit holes. I feel like I could ask you a lot of questions there about your experiences. Man, where could we take that? I guess, I do want to hit interoperability before we touch on Petaverse as well. You have some interesting thoughts there as well. Like interoperability as your North Star, I think was a quote that was pulled from one of your recent investments or investment articles where it talked about that $7 million raise. Congrats on that. But interoperability as in total, your thoughts on if we can make that happen in games.
Yeah, it's my favorite topic, honestly, because I've seen a lot of controversy, especially on Twitter, of people, hardcore gamers, saying it's a pipe dream and a delusion to think that you could take things between games. And people tend to latch on to the very specific example of how would you take your Tomb Raider skin into Call of Duty? Like, I think that's the main one I've seen thrown around and bounced around. You wouldn't. Like that is silly. It just takes thinking about things a bit differently, though. In our mind, interoperability in our world, without getting too specific on the project, comes down to a few things. We think that there are a lot of blockchains out there, and it's not going to be one blockchain, right? There can be lots of blockchains, and so you need to be able to bring your pet, your assets, your experiences between those blockchains. So that's really important to us where it comes to interoperability, and it's why we're supporting multiple blockchains. Secondly, data itself, the metadata, needs to be reinterpretable. So, in our case, our cats, we think they're really cute. They're fluffy. They look adorable. Not everyone wants that vibe. And so if you were to take our cat and bring it into the sandbox, it should look like a voxel cat. If you bring it into Minecraft, it should look like a pixel cat, and and so on. Anime cats, black and white cats, 2D cats, text cats. And so our metadata is rich and specific, one of one to pet, and we want other developers to reinterpret that metadata if they so choose. Or use our assets if they want to. That's fine too. But I think reinterpretable data is the key to being able to take things between experiences. So there's underlying stuff. You don't have to make it look like ours to support the fact that it's stripes with big eyes and pointy ears and a pink nose or heterochromatic eyes. You can do all that in any art style and still be supporting that underlying metadata. So that's really important to us as well. And the lack of walled gardens, open standards are probably the most important thing. It's why we're building this as an open standard, because even though it sounds very hippie, from a business standpoint, we make a bigger market for everybody. Mm-hmm. When we could all work together, then metaverses or, whatever you want to call them become possible because we can all collaborate.
Yeah, so you have these, like you mentioned, walled gardens. I think there's like obviously an ethos within the blockchain and Web3 space of like, I'm gonna found Sandbox or I'm gonna found Nifty Island. They're gonna be relatively open, but right now we're constrained by the technology of what we have right now. You guys did have that partnership with Nifty Island where you're gonna be able to bring in the Petaverse cats into that. Do you have to set up like incentives with each different project when you say like, hey, why don't you take some of your time and build something where we can pull in a Petaverse cat into your platform? What incentives do they need from that side, or should there be any at all?
I think there are lots of ways to think about it. I think the reaction we've had from announcing is that lots and lots of these companies want to work with us because they're looking for content and ways to grow these experiences. And so, on the one hand, they don't even really need to talk to us. It's metadata. Like we can, on the flip side, we want to support other NFT projects like CryptoKitties, for example. I want you to be able to tell us you own a CryptoKitty, and I want to make you a Petaverse cat based on your CryptoKitty.
Ooh,
The
that sounds like
metadata
a
is
little
reinterpretable.
alpha. There's Animoca
Yeah,
Brands as one of your investors. That sounds like alpha.
no. But I mean, so well, yeah. So it could be them. It could be cool cats. It could be a Bored Ape. The metadata is out there. That's what's cool about Web3, right? Is we can create something new. But what's really cool is collaborations and figuring out really interesting ways to bring these pets into those experiences. But all of it is in support of this sort of long-term vision that we want your pet to be able to go with you wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I want to give a quick shout out to the chat here. This is the Nifty Q Show. We do these for podcasting platforms as well. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but we are live on YouTube. We get these chats in here. Flubber is asking, who will be making the conversion? Do you think some tools will be available in the future to support this interoperability? And I think he's touching on the point that I was trying to make, is that it takes time to do that conversion. Does it happen from their side, or does it happen from your side? Or is there this like tool that each party can use to make that happen?
We're going to make it easier and easier so there's a couple things. If you want to make it super simple, you can interpret our metadata and have our assets. And any developer sort of worth their salt will be able to create experiences based on our cats. So we'll expose to you our model, our rig, our animations, and sample Unity scenes. Like, what's really important is that metadata that I was referring to, on the one hand, yeah, visual metadata, that's cool, and being able to reinterpret it. But there's something more compelling, which is that our pets have underlying attributes. So it's not just what they look like, it's also how they behave. And so they have a rich set of traits that define them, whether they're agile or clumsy, whether they're curious, whether they're fast or slow, their personality attributes, whether they're cowardly, whether they're a loner, whether they're humble, whether they're arrogant. Their D&D affinity is defined. Their spellcasting abilities are defined. Think of it a bit like Loot NFT, right? I was super inspired by the Loot project, cool. And in the same respect, it's not that we're necessarily there defining the items. We're actually going to do that too, in terms of defining the items that your pet owns. But here, what I'm talking about is defining the attributes. And so what that means is that if Nifty brings our cats or Sandbox or even a Web2 project like a Minecraft or Fortnite, they will have that underlying information about how the pet behaves. There are lots of projects out there that are, about being able to take something into another world. But if it doesn't have any underlying behavior, then it's kind of like a 3D GIF. We're actually defining the behavior so that those pets will behave the way they're meant to, and they've been trained. And if they've been trained, they'll behave the way they've been trained to behave. And if they have an inventory, that's also within their metadata. So all that sort of stuff is there as a sandbox for user-generated content, not necessarily big developers, also a small developer that just wants to make a cat game. I think like one of the best things to think about is like when CryptoKitties, I keep mentioning Kittyverse is another inspiration to us. Yeah. Like Kittyverse was so ahead of its time. The idea that you could take your NFT cat and do something really cool with it. You mean that was 2D. We're saying like, what if you took it the next step, the next logical step, and said now it's a 3D cat with behavior systems and model and rigging and animations? What would you make? Imagine if Nintendogs, 24 million people played Nintendogs back in the day. Imagine if they'd been NFTs. What would you do with that? If you had all of those dogs and all their model and rig and animations. Imagine what we'd be creating. We could be creating dog walking apps and mouse catching things and grooming apps and mating apps and all sorts of crazy stuff and RPGs and whatever, because you have all the assets. We find that just fascinating, and that's really what inspires us with this project, is being able to do something with these things.
Yeah, you mentioned the Kittyverse there, and you said that it's ahead of its time, and it surely was. Like, I don't even think to this day we have a true Kittyverse of what they kind of like laid out for us, which is you could build all these different things based on owning the crypto kitty. But we have this like wonderful NFT space, of course, now that's flourishing, that you guys are getting into. How did you guys kind of run into NFTs? Like you were building at these larger gaming companies. One of the other questions that we'll get to later is like, are these gaming companies coming in now from your perspective? I'm sure you have like a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge on those larger companies. But as far as like finding out about NFTs for the first time, what was your experience there, and how did you connect the dots?
Yeah, it was a passive interest. I mean, we were aware of and understood blockchain. We, especially my partner, really educated me about it, I would say, over the years. And we're passionate supporters of Ethereum, and a blockchain that's about being able to build apps and build things and do things, as opposed to just being a currency. So that's always fascinated us. We've always liked to be at the bleeding edge of things. We get bored. And so once upon a time, that was free to play, and we thought that was an interesting place to move. So we picked up the rights to Doctor Who, and we did a game called Doctor Who Legacy as a free to play mobile game that was highly regarded. And then a few years ago, we won a big British government grant for AR, to do a project with Aardman, a Wallace and Gromit project. So we put together a few companies as partners, and we spent 3 years tinkering and spending about £5 million to build some bleeding edge AR experiences that won awards. And we came out of this last year at the start of the year, and I looked at, so my partner Lee is the creative side of things. I'm business enabler. I'm his enabler. Like, he gets crazy ideas and I find ways to get it funded and to get a team to do it and make it happen. And so in this case, I said to him, I think we need to do something with AR that's simpler than what we were trying to do, that is understandable to a user to say, oh, now I get why I should care about AR, right? And so I said, let's get a cat walking around a space and bring it to life and have it occluding off behind walls and jumping up on tables and all these delightful things, magical to someone who doesn't really understand AR. We knew we could do. But we were really worried that we were going to go all in on consumer AR when no one was really doing anything with consumer AR, and that was a risky thing for a company. So, we're like, so what would that cat be like in VR? And what would that cat be like in a web experience? What would that cat be like on your smartwatch if you just wanted to pet your cat on your smartwatch? And Lee said to me, blockchain's the way we're going to do that. If we could define that pet as data, instead of confining it to a specific experience, then it becomes resilient. And it stops mattering exactly which place we're putting it at that given time. We can make it transposable and bring it to different places. Because ultimately, we're big believers in these AR glasses. As soon as Apple decides that we're ready for AR glasses, we're all going to have AR glasses. I guarantee you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because you could have went the virtual reality route. It sounds like you guys are like more interested in augmented reality.
We're doing VR too. We actually, this year, we plan to get an alpha of a VR project out that will be a totally different way of experiencing your pet. So we like VR. We love AR.
Yeah. So 10 years down the line, are more people going to be in their quest in virtual reality, or are more people going to be looking at augmented reality objects through their phone?
I'm glad you said 10 years from now, because I think 10 years from now, it's reasonable to think they'll have glasses that do both. And I'm not an engineer, so I barely understand why it's so hard. It is hard to try to do both. But imagine being able to have your glasses just fog off when a VR experience is appropriate, and then open back up when you want AR. I think that's where we'll get to personally, or maybe it's just my hope. But we're very excited about that. We were actually one of Qualcomm's first partners, just announced for their Snapdragon Spaces, because Qualcomm led the way in VR. In terms of mass adoption and their reference viewers that helped to lead to the Oculus Quest. And they're just as passionate about AR now. And they're putting a lot of resource behind making AR glasses a thing. And so we're really excited to be partnering with them on that. And that's us keeping our feet in that. We know it's early. Yeah. We're not there yet, because Apple hasn't put out AR glasses yet. And I firmly believe that that's going to be one of the big things it takes.
I love AR from like an earning perspective as well. Like when you guys add like gaming integrations or play to earn concepts, we were talking on NFT Live, which is like our roundtable discussion. In Buffalo was bringing up one of our content creators was bringing up that virtual reality can sometimes look dystopian with like people just like slaving away on their computer in the dark room trying to earn, but
Mm,
augmented reality takes you outside in a way. You could do augmented reality
yes.
inside, but it takes you to
100%.
places IRL.
Not only that, it makes you, and I'm stealing this from somebody smarter than me who said this once upon a time. AR makes you look up and around you in
Yes.
a way that VR doesn't. It takes us off of our phone and looking. And you're still looking for right now. You're looking through a phone, but eventually it's through your glasses. And isn't that wonderful that it's kind of like bringing us all back together instead of this sort of thing on your phone.
I love that you bring up the glasses as like the medium to view this, because I think you're right. Like the glasses are the important piece. Right now, it's kind of clunky to view things through your phone and see it into reality. But when it's on your face, it almost looks like real life. That's gonna be. I'm you're blowing my mind right now. That's
Oh,
awesome.
100%. Let me blow your mind a little bit further and tell you that, and without going too deep into a future of where this is all going, our vision, where Lee's really going with this, is the idea that we want these. This is the stepping stones along the way to get to those glasses in the future. What we're doing right now, we want to sell you a cat so that when you do get those glasses in 10 years from now, or whatever it is, 5 years from now, you look down and there's that cat you bought from Petaverse Network now, and you trained it and you loved it and you didn't sell it, and it's still there running around the world with you. But so is someone else's dragon, and someone else's Great Dane, and someone else's rabbit, and it's like his Dark Materials daemon, and they're all playing together, and they're behaving based on their NFT,
Mm.
their underlying behavior set. And the cat runs off around the corner, and you find it playing because it's playful, and so your cat plays, and he comes to you to tell you when he's hungry. Like, that's the big North Star of where this. I firmly believe this is all going, and why NFTs are so important, because it lets us buy stuff and keep it like that. That, in a nutshell, is what excites me more than anything. And that's Robbie Young gets credit for that Animoca.
Oh,
He blew my mind when he said on an AMA last year, for years gamers have been renting their stuff. Imagine if they could buy it. And I was like, that's it. That is why this is important. That's all we need to say. That's it.
yeah. I had Yatsu on the podcast last week, I believe, and he's always a great guy to have on the podcast. We do like quarterly interviews at this point. I remember talking with him in like 2017 and 18 and doing interviews when no one gave a shit about all this. But
Yeah.
Yat talked about how the industries around physical objects, or objects when ownership is applied, and he uses the example of a car, the actual industries around that car are bigger than the car industry itself.
Mm, mm.
The baby seats, the automobile or car washes, or all these different industries that exist because people can own cars. It kind
Mm.
of blew my mind that was a good one. But Yacht always does that.
And it's going to be the same, right? I mean, because that's the thing. If we're right about this and we pull it off, it will be the same virtually. Because
Yes.
imagine if it matters that you should matter if you take care of your virtual pet, right? So if I'm going to go away for a few weeks, maybe I pay someone to look after my NFT virtual pet.
Yeah.
You know,
I could see a scholarship for that.
breeding services, high-end food, Louis Vuitton dog collars and cat collars and stuff. There's so much industry that can spawn around this. I agree with you.
This can go dystopian too quickly though, because then you're paying
Our pets don't
for
die.
all.
Our pets will not die.
That was a good
That's
question. But
they don't die.
now you're having to pay for the services in both IRL, and you got to keep track of both. But
Yeah, there's a danger in that kind of stuff, and we are not a manipulative company. In fact, when we did our first free to play game, I think we were generous to a fault. I think Kotaku, as much as they hate NFTs now, back then they called us the most fair version of free to play they'd ever seen. And so I hope that gives people comfort that that's just never, what we're about. Because
love it.
it does feel manipulative.
Yeah. I want to get into Petaverse. We've like kind of
Yeah,
touched on a little bit of the things that you guys are doing within that network, but
yeah.
I have three, I think, lightning questions that I've kind of penned while we've been talking.
Okay.
I've got game companies coming into NFTs. You mentioned Kotaku is
Yeah.
like a publisher that talks about how bad NFTs are. We've seen some or gaming studios kind of also have to pull back because gamers just don't like the idea. So with your experience at the bigger studios or some of the connections you still have there, do we see Rockstar do an NFT? Do we see Riot? Do we see all these larger gaming studios get into NFTs anytime soon?
I think it's going to take time. I think that, again, we'd have to look back at like mobile and free to play and what happened there, which is that the big publishers waited and eventually bought their way in. And so I think you'll see a lot of M&A over the coming years as there's a lot of fair questions about securities regulations and tokenomics and how this is all going to play out, and big publishers are afraid of that. They also have to be wary of even talking about blockchain right now, right? That like stocks are nosediving because they even suggest that they're doing an NFT project. But in both of those things are really cool opportunities for indies. I'm willing to talk and I'm willing to have people shout at me and tell me that I'm wrong. But it's really hard when you're a big public company. And so I think you'll see a lot of people sort of waiting and seeing, and because there've been a lot of bruises between like what happened with Ubisoft when they announced their project, Team 17 announced and then quickly pulled back. And it is hard so I think, and the rest of them are probably looking at it going, let's not even bother because look what happened to them.
Well, there's a lot of people in the NFT space that are like, why are gamers always so mad at the studios for integrating these NFTs? Like, have you met gamers? Gamers are kind of toxic. I'm toxic.
Gamers do not like new business models. And they don't like the publishers either. They like the studios. They don't like the publishers.
Oh, I see.
And this goes back to what I was saying before. There isn't enough out there for gamers to trust this yet. It's a reasonable concern because games take a long time to make. And, there's a lot of push right now, especially from the investment world, for people to be quick and take advantage of the market right now. That's not conducive to making hardcore, robust games that can compete with the non-NFT stuff out there. That's what's going to take time. And so I think that that's what it's going to take for hardcore gamers to jump on board, is to see examples of this. But I think that there are baby steps along the way, framing it in the mass market, like what we're doing with virtual pets, being legitimate and giving people real utility immediately, I think is going to help. Like, look, Nintendogs was a mass market game. And at that time, Nintendo had been very, male hard, and more, not hardcore, but more male. Then they started putting out Nintendogs and like Wii Fit and Brainage and stuff like that. And they started hitting this much more mass market audience. But gamers are playing that stuff too. It's like Candy Crush. There were gamers playing Candy Crush too, just no one talked about it. Mm-hmm. And so you start to get comfortable with it and have fun with it, even if you don't talk about it. And then it becomes possible to get them to do other things. And and I think that the messaging too. I think that I've seen some of the press from game publishers focus on the environmental aspects of it, like Ubisoft talked about that. And I think that, look, I think any of us who are in blockchain know that it's not the problem everyone thinks it is. Like, very, if you look at Polygon, if you look at Flow, if you look at IMX, these are all trying to be as carbon neutral as possible. I read the other day that the average Flow mint takes less energy than a Google search.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those stories are out there, but people. Yeah, it's a narrative being pushed. And the problem is blockchain is so hard to understand and to get up to speed on that it takes a lot of time to read and convince yourself otherwise. And so it's very easy to say, I heard it's bad for the environment, mining. So I don't think that that's the message that's going to convince gamers, because I don't think that I don't think many people have they don't care enough to go and read about it. It's very easy to just look back what you saw and reinforce those opinions. So I think it's going to take something more than that. I think, and it's specifically changing that messaging, having it be less about reselling the stuff and more about utility. Like, look, another good example that I gave recently is MMOs. I was a hardcore MMO player. My husband and I both. We played EverQuest back in its beta. Like, that's how long I've been playing MMOs. And EverQuest, I remember when people started selling their characters on eBay, and that became a thing. And gold farming became a thing. But very few people, other than gold farmers, played EverQuest to level up and sell off a character. They played it because they loved it.
Yes.
And sometimes they sold it off, and and that was fine. And I kind of think that this is the same thing. Gamers want to hear that there's stuff you can do with it, that it's not just about selling it, that it's also about keeping it and having things to do with it. And so the more this becomes a year of utility, I hope this is the year of utility in NFTs, next year and beyond. I think that that's what it's going to take is showing instead of just talking at it.
It's that old adage of like very slowly and then all at once, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
definitely how I see the gaming industry kind of forming. So I know I said that was a lightning question, but I went down a rabbit hole as well. So I don't blame us for going down. These two are actually lightning questioners, or at least this one.
Okay.
Maybe we have the play to earn discussion near the end, so that we can get into Petaverse. But you mentioned Lee and yourself being married. Is that harder or easier to pitch in an investment meeting? Because I know a lot of people like a co-founder aspect
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we were founding a company. Is it harder or easier, and how has that been managing your
It was
relationship
only
and your
ever once
business?
an issue. I had one investor pass last year who said to me that one of the reasons was because they weren't comfortable with the fact that the founders were married.
Huh.
But that's out of like, I don't know. I probably talked to like 100 different
Yeah,
investors,
yeah, yeah.
maybe. So no, it never really has been an issue. I would hope that the fact that we've been together for 24 years and have a 13-year-old and survived a pandemic means that we're okay. Right?
I think you're good there. Okay, we've made it up to the point where we can talk about Petaverse. I think we
Awesome.
laid a great foundation on your ethos with interoperability. You touched on a couple different pieces with augmented reality as well. So tell me what you're building with Petaverse Network, and let's dive in.
Yeah. So Petaverse is at the high level of it is that it's an open standard for digital pets, interoperable open standard for digital pets. The tangible, the first is where we're launching these cats, and so we've built a tool that we call our pet creation kit. That starting with cats. And I started showing off some videos of this on social media. Allows us to create a myriad, 1 quadrillion, literally, or more, one of one cats, quirky cats, especially. Like, we can give them IMX eyes and polygon skin and wrecking ball tails, and we can even make them cyborgs, so we can make them metallic. Like, we do all sorts of crazy stuff with these cats, and then define their underlying statistics, like I was talking about. And so we're going to be doing a drop. And what's really cool about the drop, and which will be is that we'll be launching an app alongside it, and we call it our photo booth app. And it's your first chance to get to interact with your pet. You'll get to see your pet, name your pet, and it's built for sharing to social media. So we've created these wonderful scripted moments that you're familiar with from YouTube, like putting your cucumber behind a cat and having it freak out if you've ever seen that. They think it's a
Yes.
snake, I
Yeah.
guess. We're chasing a mouse and all this sort of stuff. You'll be able to bring your NFT into that experience and create these experiences around your pet and instantly share it to social media and show that. You'll have a digital trading card that shows all the information about your pet, including which epoch it came in and its stats and its D&D alignment, all this sort of stuff is something that's part of the mint process. That's just the first thing that we're launching. We'll also be launching a VR experience, the alpha of the VR experience later this year, which will be a completely different vibe with your cat. And then we'll be launching basically our take on Nintendogs, which we are calling tentatively Petaverse Origins. And this is where the NFTs will really shine, because this is where those underlying stats really come to bear, and you'll be able to train and nurture and love your pet and bond with your pet. Be able to whistle your pet and teach it to come to you. And if it's smarter, it'll be more receptive to being trained to come to you. It'll problem solve. If it's curious and it's hungry, it's going to try to find the food that you've hidden somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If it's less curious, it's just going to get frustrated. If it's agile, it might jump up onto a surface where you put the food. And not only that, it actually forms memories, and it's going to remember how it found the food, so that next time it can find it there.
That's awesome. Sorry, I had an audio issue there. Hopefully, I'm coming.
I thought something strange happened there. So our NFTs. What's interesting here is that we have we just announced that we're partnering with Curve Grid, who are creating our custom smart contracts with us. We're working closely together on this because we have a few tricks up our sleeves in terms of how we think about interoperability. And one of the things that we want to let you do is to take your pet between blockchains. You'll be able to bridge, but you'll also be able to have a passport to bring your pet between blockchains. And we call this cloning, but the idea is that you can use your pet in multiple blockchains all at the same time. And we have a hybrid solution which allows us to store quite a bit of information off-chain as mutable metadata, including the memories of the pet. And then we have a thumbprint on-chain. And so that's really important to us. And that's part of so this year we'll be rolling out on multiple blockchains to support that goal and to be able to support as many different types of experiences as possible.
I think the part that I was really fascinated with is this idea of a companion, right? Because obviously, like, again, analog experience, people love their dogs, their cats, all these things. But in the metaverse right now, people are very focused on themselves in a way. Like when I'm thinking about my Bored Ape, it's me. It's not like a companion. It's literally myself. But there haven't been many projects that are those then next pieces, which is a companion to share the metaverse with, which is where I was really connected with it. So was that like
it's
really
your identity, right? Yeah, absolutely. It's your identity. I see this being, an influencer's sidekick, for example. We've done successful tests around having that pet in the background while you're Twitch streaming. Like we want that to be wherever you want it to be. So it's not just about AR. It's not just about VR. It's really literally about being able to take this pet into your lifestyle.
Yeah, this is an awesome feature of augmented reality too. We talked about getting out into the world. Flubber is asking some great questions, so keep it up. Chat here. He says, I've been reading up, and as I listened to you, I was wondering whether you're also thinking about move to evolve or adapt with your pet, like syncing between the app and steps data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some really cool projects that are doing stuff like this. I definitely think so. Where it comes to, things like what Niantic is doing in terms of real world locations. I think that it's a fascinating part of this. And it's absolutely something that we're looking at is, what happens when you go out in the world with your pet? Nintendogs had this really cool feature. If you remember, did you play Nintendogs?
I was going to say earlier that I'm dating myself, but no, I didn't play Nintendogs.
All right, so Nintendogs is what you would expect it to be. It's a virtual pet app, but one of the things you could do with your dog was take it for a walk. And so on a screen, you would map out its walk, right? And if it was fed and healthy enough, it could go on these long walks with you. We've talked about trying to get that sort of functionality maybe into the real world where you can take your pet out with you and find stuff. So yeah, all of that is what the game that's coming, the full on game Origins, when that comes, is going to have a whole slew of functionality around making your pet part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the play to earn mechanics there. I know you said like right off the bat, it's going to be more about just raising your companion and all of these augmented reality features, which are really cool. You guys should check out. I need to get the Twitter link here in the chat, but I definitely want to. I know it's like Petaverse Network without the O at the end.
Petaverse. Oh yeah, so Twitter. Yeah, exactly. Without it was too long. We couldn't get the O in.
Yeah, there's some really dope videos if you guys want to check that out. I'm sure you could search Petaverse Network as well on Twitter. You can basically control the cat that you guys have on the screen there, and you're able to kind of see the different personalities of these different cats that might be a little bit more skittish or things like this. It's pretty cool. But what is this mechanic that you're going to build in later as the game launches?
So on our roadmap are a few things. Breeding is going to be really important to us. And so we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on figuring out how the breeding system is going to work, how we're going to monetize that, and how that's going to be a way of, seeing textures that were in one epoch, that have gone away, having that be a way to look at getting those to come back and be able to monetize your pets. And again, going back to, if we want you to keep your pet, we still want you to have ways of being able to treat it like an NFT. And we think a lot of that's about breeding. On the sort of token side, we very, very much want to have a DAO. That's always been on our roadmap. And so I think that the first thing that you'd potentially see from us is a governance token. Because look, it's all fine and well to say, that it's an open standard. We don't want a privileged position in what we're building. We want anything that we can do with these cats. We want everybody else who supports our open standard to do as well. And we want the community to feel like they don't have to worry that we moved on to something other than Petaverse. Like we want them to be able to trust that 30 years from now it's still their pet.
Are
And we
you
think part of that is having it out.
and you guys are, yeah, I know we talked about the Kittyverse. You guys are building out, I'm sure, like a multiple different platforms in this kind of umbrella of Tiny Rebel Games. Is that is that kind of the idea?
So within Petaverse, yeah, we've got a bunch
Okay.
of different. Our focus is 100% Petaverse. Like,
Got it.
honestly, one pet would be a massive undertaking. We could probably spend years just doing cats.
Yeah.
But dogs and dragons, are next. Which maybe I don't think we revealed that too much yet. Dogs and dragons, I've been fond of saying, are the next two pets that you'll see within the Petaverse. And so that's a big undertaking, and so I don't think we'll be doing anything other than pets for a long time. But on the other hand, everything we're doing makes as much sense for non-pets too. Robots, zombies, aliens. You can imagine other intelligent creatures that they don't have to be what you typically think of as a pet. Hence dragons. Like
Yeah.
mythical pets are just as dope as real pets, right? I'd love to have my own dragon.
Very much so. Are you?
Spyro following you around? I mean, how cool would that be?
Spyro's more. That's in my wheelhouse. That's PlayStation. I am all for that.
Yeah. Love Spyro.
Are,
That's one of my favorite platform games of all time.
so are you talking to cat companies? I know this is kind of like Web 2, so don't hang me by my thumbs, guys. But like, are you talking to like? I think Iams is maybe a cat company, but I'm just like being able to integrate like real companies that are about cats into these environments.
It's absolutely something on a road. Look, I think Web3 is all about bringing the Web2 guys into it, right?
Yeah.
I'm just as excited about Web2 game projects that we can sort of help migrate into Web3, with our sort of blockchain pets. But yeah, and charities as well. A big part of what we're doing is involving charities. Because look, it's really interesting. I think one of the most interesting counterpoints to the environmental questions of blockchain is, what about the environmental impact of pets? It's crazy what that does to the environment, between the
Yeah.
poo, from the pets to the grass, but also the plastic toys and the food and the clothing for pets, all the rest of this stuff. It's a massive environmental drain too. There've been some studies about this, and so I think that in many ways, and this starts to disrupt how we think about pets. Yeah, I mean, there's so many pets were put down after the pandemic. There's an awful report that there was a vet in England who was putting down 3 healthy pets a day because people didn't want them anymore once they were able to leave their houses.
Well, it's a little bit more, and I hate to like frame it this way, but a lot of people can't take care, or maybe there's kids that they can't, make the decision that they're going to have a pet. There's a lot of people that could own pets. Maybe it's a digital pet. Maybe it's a digital companion.
100% allergies, elderly people who can't take care of pets anymore, people who aren't sure if they want a pet, maybe want to start with a virtual pet and see how it goes.
Yeah.
So again, all down the road, it's not our first and foremost thing is we're going to get an awesome drop of cats out for people, but all of this stuff is where we're really thinking.
Yeah, I'm looking ahead a little bit, and I'm definitely not I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but the game is going to be very interesting. You mentioned there's going to be a token. You have a lot of investors that are in the NFT space. You mentioned Robbie Young from Animoca Brands, so I'm excited for that version of what you guys have coming. But as it stands today, from a user perspective, how do I get involved in Petaverse, and then what does that look like? Is it like a Pokemon-esque situation where like I go in and pick a cat, or am I randomly assigned a cat? How does that all work from a user perspective?
That's a great question. Yeah. So we've made this really cool editor, which we've started to show off a little bit. Right now, it's for us. We're going to be building these cats, and the first drop is going to be blind boxed. They're all cool, which I think is awesome. It's interesting with pets. It's almost like how you start to think about rarity becomes kind of complex because we all like different things. But there's definitely be some really quirky, crazy ass cats coming, like cyborg cats and metallic cats and things like that. So there's definitely quirky there. But so we'll be building the initial cats. But our aspiration is to open that editor up so that you could make basic cats in the future. And I think this is part of also how we go mass market as well. We're not going to let you make metallic cats, and some of these cool things that are going to be, again, blind boxed. But we do ultimately aspire to letting people, create their little fluffy friends.
Mm. I like that a lot. You mentioned the rarity piece, and I don't mean to go like full degen, but a lot of us in crypto and NFTs, we're in it to not necessarily sell, but to like find the rarest one, or
Yeah,
FOMO
yeah,
into the rarest piece. So how are you
100%.
looking at rarity when it comes to maybe even breeding? Do those get passed down? Are there do the evolutions of the cat actually make it more rare when you maybe eventually sell? Maybe you have to, but how does that all work with rarity and evolution and breeding?
It's, that's something we're spending a lot of time on right now, and it's one of the reasons why we've involved some of the investors we have in terms of like feedback that we want as we sort of go deeper and deeper into this. We definitely are keeping all of that in mind. Each drop will have pets of varying rarity, all the way up through sort of like legendary rare pets. And what's really cool is this digital card that I mentioned. So our editor auto generates a backstory based on its attributes, which is written by a good friend of ours who freelances, who's also works for Aardman, on Wallace and Gromit. So he's written these backstories for us, and it also auto generates this digital card, and the digital card exposes the stats, exposes which generation it came from. The first one's going to be alpha, so if you're one of the first OGs on the pest, you'll have an alpha card. It'll tell you its element, its D&D alignment, and all this sort of stuff. And that's an asset that I actually I've started to think that that's actually the most interesting asset in terms of like your Twitter profile and social media. Is here's the card, here's the exact roster of what I own. I think it's really cool. So yeah, I totally get it. I think in the future, as it goes mass market, it's going to become less and less about scarcity, but it's super important, and we know it's really
For
important to
sure, yeah.
our core audience. So it is something we're spending a lot of time on, is handcrafting the drop within these sets. And we also want to do some brand tie-ins. We have a lot of different brands that we're talking to about doing some quirky things with pets. So that'll be to come in the future and talk about in the future.
Yeah, and again, you don't have to touch on this. I'm sure you can't speak too much on it, but I'm assuming that future governance token probably has some tie into early people who get into the project in
There
a
will be
sense.
rewards for coming in early and for holding on to this, like in terms of we're looking at things like being able to give you sort of an underlying whitelist to future pet drops. And imagine if you have, like, for instance, let's just say a metallic blue and red cat, and now we come out with dragons. What does the dragon version of your cat look like? What's the dog version of your cat look like? Wouldn't you like to collect the whole set? As we have 6, 7, 8 different animals in the Petaverse, you could have the whole set themed around the same sort of skin to try to collect. And so we're looking at that collection mechanic as well. What are the incentives to collect and to hold?
I mentioned earlier that this isn't really a PFP project, right? Like, for the most part, it's not going to be seen as like, I'm going to throw my cat up on my profile picture. I'm interested in like what your thoughts are from like a companion standpoint of like these different projects. Are there any other companion projects out there that you look at, and or maybe even in Web 2, where I know you mentioned Nintendogs, but are there any other projects that are doing companions? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here, that are doing this well.
I mean, there are other NFT projects that are doing pets. Certainly we're not the only one. We're doing a Twitter Spaces on Friday with a bunch of other pet projects in the metaverse.
Okay.
We're quite Web3 about this, and we mean it. Like, we really are Web3 about this. That we really don't see other pet NFT projects as competitors. We actually really want to collaborate with them.
Okay.
I think the most efficient way of building the pets out will be to collaborate, support our standard, use our same standard. And what that means is that projects that support us support you too. So that's a really cool value add.
What are some of the other like pet projects that you're on that panel on with?
There was some of them I didn't know. I have to say I didn't know
I don't
most
know
of them,
any.
which is cool. It
Yeah.
wasn't the ones that I was aware of. So I'm gonna have to draw a blank now to say if I remember which ones they are. But and then there's some Web 2 things, like Niantic just announced their Peridot virtual pet, which is a Web 2 project. So there's some Web 2 things that are going on in that space. I don't think anyone's trying to tackle it as broadly as we are, in terms of saying that this isn't about one type of pet. This is about all pets, and
Yeah.
more importantly than that, it's about behavior sets and bringing them between worlds.
So
And I should say that, and all these experiences that we're building retroactively will support the pets in the future. So when you get your dragon, you'll be able to bring it into the same app that you brought your cat into, and in your dog, you'll be able to bring it into, and your rabbit, and so forth. So these apps are meant to like support all of the different pets that we're doing.
Gotcha. Okay. So because we kind of, I wouldn't say drew a blank because you mentioned a couple different like projects in Web 2, but within Web3, what are some PFP projects or NFT projects that you guys look at for inspiration from like a community building standpoint, or just who you think that is doing that well? I'm interested in like these founders, what they're taking from other founders within Web3.
Sure. I mean, going back to Doodles, I'm super impressed by that project in so many different ways. I guess it's no coincidence that they came from CryptoKitties, So I consider them, inspirational for lots of reasons. But the downside, the fact that you have to hold on to your Doodle to vote, I found really, really cool. And that was one of the first projects that I saw really saying, actually, we don't want you to get rid of it. And so, we've talked at length with those guys. Sebastian at Sandbox is one of our advisors and investors. We talk to Sebastian all the time. I'm super inspired by Sandbox and, what they're trying to do. And Sebastian's become like, the first rock star of NFTs, it feels like. And he's become like the ambassador, of gaming in blockchain, which is cool. I love Nifty Island, and I talk all the time to those guys, especially because they've just set up a DAO. So I'm most interested in talking to projects that are doing DAOs as well. It's Ready Player DAO is one of our investors too, and so we talk to those guys a lot and try to learn from their experiences. And Charlie Sandor at CMT Digital is just tremendously well informed about DAOs and set up Ready Player DAO as well. So that's been where a lot of my focus in talking to their projects has been. What are the pitfalls of setting up a DAO, and how do we think about it, and how do we do it in the best way? And I don't think anyone really knows yet.
Yeah.
But that's one of the big places we're learning.
Yeah, BAYC has had some really cool discussions on DAO mechanics, and they've been like out in the open.
And they're super inspirational. God, and the stuff that they're doing now with Animoca. It's hard not to be inspired by that project, by the elephant in the room,
very, very true. Very true. I understood why you didn't bring it up, because it is kind of just like there.
What's the point, right? It's like bringing up Axie if you bring up Play to Earn. Like, yes, and obviously them. But I
want to hit some last pieces on Petaverse before we move into the like. I want to ask you a couple questions on Play to Earn. You mentioned Axie there, but anything else on Petaverse? You're getting some comments in the chat on like when this drop is and how people can get involved. So can you give us details there?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get involved is to join our Discord, because we're doing a lot of whitelisting right now in preparation for the launch. We are close to announcing a date. We are about to announce our first blockchain partner. Should be a press release coming in the next sort of like week or two, and that's been kind of the holdup of making some announcements, as we want to make some firm decisions there. So soon, I'm not ready to say a date, but it's very, very soon. We'll say, and I've said this time and time again, we won't launch unless the app's ready, because I want people to trust us when we say you're going to have something you can do with these NFTs. But the app's almost ready too, so we're in great shape. Our editor's done. We are growing cats as we speak, and it's really we want to make sure that our community really understands it when we launch. We're doing a lot of work right now on our messaging and really articulating a pretty complex project. And so we need a little bit more time to just feel like we're ready from a community standpoint. But we're not far off.
Yeah. Last question I have from a lightning question, I guess, in a user perspective, would be like the evolution and like the evolve process of the cat. I know you mentioned the cat doesn't die. That's good to hear, that I'm not just going to lose my cat one day, but how are you looking at like the cat changing through its timeline?
Yeah, so actually, it's interesting. You'll get a kitten and a cat version of your pet, and some of the apps will support the app as a kitten, and some of them will support the app as a cat. So that's interesting. But then also, remember, you're training your pet, and so they'll have stats like agile versus clumsy, for example. You'll be able to train them one direction or the other. So you could have like a super clumsy cat, or sort of like a gymnast cat on the other end of the spectrum, and that stuff gets saved to the metadata for the pet. So that stuff is if other projects support that metadata, they will support that too. So if you bring your pet into the sandbox and he's super agile, he should be super agile when he's in the sandbox, and so that is a really important part of the metadata, and the memories as well. Them forming memories of how they problem solve. That's also part of the metadata.
This is a cool conversation, because what you guys are getting at is like you're taking the Kittyverse, a conversation and that ethos of what CryptoKitties was trying to do, and has just like shown, I wouldn't say no interest in doing, but it hasn't happened at this point. Like that's what you're kind of getting at, is like I could foresee a Petaverse pet a cat, for example, being in the sandbox and racing in some type of sandbox game race or things like this.
100%, right? Racing cats, totally,
Yeah.
totally. We think about this stuff all the time. We have such ridiculously crazy ideas about what you should be able to do with your cats. So
Yeah.
it's not just going to be one thing, and that's probably the hardest part of the messaging. Is we get people in Discord saying, "When's the game coming? When's the game coming?" It's like, well, which game?
Yeah.
It's not just one game. Like I'm not being being funny. Like there are a bunch of things coming, and they're going to continue to be a bunch of things coming. And it's why we raised money and got the great investors that we did involved. Is we have a lot that we want to do. Multiple pets, multiple games, multiple blockchains. Like it's a huge undertaking that we've taken on.
Yeah, this is an amazing conversation, and it is whenever you get to like a big project or tackling a lot, it definitely is hard to kind of break down everything that you're doing, but I think you did it very well here today.
We didn't take it the easy route. There's the easy route of a Web 2, sort of like a Web 2 game developer getting involved. Like I'm fond of saying, you could just put NFT hats on your characters. Like that's I guess a viable route to saying you're going to go Web 3. It sucks.
Yeah.
That's not interesting to us. We went the exact opposite way. And, Fabric's our lead investor, and Neil there is fond of saying to me over and over again, yeah, because it's hard. That's why you're finding that problem, because it's hard. And I love that we have investors who get that, who aren't looking at us saying that we should always have the solutions, who are actually respectful of the fact that we're trying to do some really hard stuff. And, we constantly find edge cases that you can't predict. And that's what gets me out of bed as well. It's the reason I don't sleep at night anymore, is constant edge cases and problem solving.
Well, especially in the augmented reality space that we touched on earlier, it's like how many projects are working within the Web3 space and in augmented reality that I could probably count them on my hands. So
we're not making it easy on ourselves by any means. I know.
No, but usually the hard path leads to some awesome success. So I definitely wish you guys that. I don't really have any. I think we touched on it pretty well here, the network and the industry discussion. So if you have any last pieces on Petaverse, I did have one last question as well on the play to earn space, and how do you kind of view that as you guys get set to launch your game maybe next year or early or later this year. So do you have anything on Petaverse?
Yeah, the play to earn thing, I think play to earn is an obvious thing, right? It's not that dissimilar to what happened in free to play and the sort of in-app currencies and things like that. So to me, it's a given that that's going to be a part of it. It's just not as compelling to me, maybe because it's been done now, and look, it hasn't been done for a length of time. We're all still learning, including Axie, right? Like until that's live for like 5 years, we can't say what works because it's all gonna sort of come out in the wash. But that part of me is sort of the more obvious application is to throw play to earn into a game, and it's going to be a great path forward for lots of companies. It's just for us, we just wanted to do something a little bit left field of that. And it was interesting. Every single game fund that we pitched on this turned us down last year. On the other hand, we were 3 times overcommitted on what we tried to raise, all from Web3 investors. And that troubled me. And I think it was largely because everyone just kind of wanted to see something that was, very just about play to earn. And we were these weirdos saying that we wanted to create these pets and so people were like, why would anyone ever want to sell their NFT, and is that going to work? And but the Web3 investors that we pitched on it totally got it. Everyone got so excited about it, got excited about the open standard, excited about interoperability, and excited about this vision of the 24 million people who bought Nintendogs. And so it was really validating and exciting, and I think that the quality of investors that we got involved have really helped us to get where we're getting to, because they've asked the right questions. They've really pushed us hard on hard topics that were foreign to us as a developer,
Yeah, love those investors. Shout out to Parada Capital and Mike Finch. We were talking
100%. Parada's awesome. Mike's one of my favorites.
Amazing stuff. All right, Susan, I'm going to let you out of here, and I'm going to give one last shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you for tuning into the Nifty Q Show. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. I had Susan Cummings on here from the Petaverse Network, CEO, and we had a great conversation. I think we learned some things today about a lot of different topics. So Susan, thank you so much for stopping by. Any last words here on the episode?
Join our Discord server. Follow us on Twitter. Like we really want people to get involved right now before the drop. And even before we set up a DAO, we want the community to feel like one. We legitimately want to hear what people want. We do town halls. And we're going to start doing more voting. We only want to ask people to vote if we actually want your opinion and plan to follow it. Like, it's a dangerous thing. If we say X or Y, we have to be willing to go with whatever you say. And so we're very cautious about, what are the sort of things that are changeable, and making sure that we're asking questions that we legitimately are ready to pivot based on the answer. But I think you're going to see us doing more and more of that, because we want it to start to, to feel like a DAO even before it is one.
I love that ethos, and I love that you're going community first. So, guys, we are going to get up out of here. This was a conversation between two dog lovers about digital cats in the metaverse and interoperability. First time ever. But I will see you guys later. Thanks so much. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.